Hey, I see we just opened the door. So as you all come in, take your seats, find a comfy chair. I will. I guess we'll kick it off in about 2 minutes or so. So you get to look at me looking awkward for a few minutes. Just about one more minute before we get going. All right. As the stragglers come on in, let's get this moving. We can start up now. I see there are about 13 people in, and like the last session, going to maybe ask a few questions as we go through. And as you have questions, please either raise your hand or drop something into the chat, and we can get going. I'm going to try to. I'm usually pretty good at pronouncing people's names. However, the first person in the attendees list I might have a little trouble with. Whoever you are, you have an amazing name. ARGTCQGP, etc. So anyway, I'm going to share my screen, and let's see, make sure this is all set. And make sure, Mara, I did it right? You can see the presentation?
Yep, I can see just the bars along the side, but the presentation is there.
Oh, the black bars. Yeah. I made these in the smaller aspect ratio. So anyway, let's get going. And today, after all of the talk that we've been having about growing numbers and increasing open rates and increasing click-through rates, and we talked about those as the three primary metrics, I wanted to talk a bit more about some other metrics that are available to you and ways that you might put them together in goal sets. And we've been talking for weeks now about different types of goals, and everybody's got different ones. But as part of your plan, you may be looking for ways to put that together and to come up with a measurement plan and a way to present it to your team and to others. And as I mentioned, there was a lot of great Q&A throughout, and please keep that up. And from henceforth, I love to be interrupted. So how do we measure analytics, and what do you have available to us? Most of the attendees are using MailChimp. If you're not, there are and if you're using Constant Contact, there's a lot of very similar tools that are available in there. If you're using a different system, I'd love to hear about it, and maybe I can help you find the specifics if you're not already familiar with them. Relating to your particular mail program. Again, a lot of you are on Google Analytics. I think I found 3 that I can't identify. I certainly can't identify Google Analytics on your site. And I know I talked to somebody last week who's using just the WordPress analytics that are built in. So if there's something else, we can take a look at that as well in a one-on-one to how to apply what we're talking about here. But I wanted to really focus in on the specifics of the tools that that most people are using. And then we're going to talk about goal setting using SMART goals. And some of you may have heard these until you never want to hear it again. This may be new to a few of you. It's an acronym for specific and measurable and attainable goals that are relevant and timely. So specific, I want my open rate to increase by 20%. Measurable, well, that's measurable because you can look at where you were before and where you were after. It's attainable. It's not ridiculous. You're not saying you're going to quadruple your number of newsletters in the next month. So it has to be attainable. Otherwise, it'll be disappointing when you don't hit that goal. It has to be relevant to your business and mission goals. What are you trying to accomplish? And timely, meaning you can't say one day. These will be things we'll get to by the end of this year, by a year from now, by the end of next month. You can set the timeline, whatever is appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish, and the level of urgency around it. And then finally, if we can have time to get to it, and if we don't, I will definitely put it into the next session. There's one thing that many of you, based on what I've been able to find through some primary research, aren't doing that can increase your traffic dramatically to your site, which will, of course, make it easier to get more subscribers to your newsletter. So we'll talk about that towards the end, so stick around. So what are you using for analytics? I said, mainly GA, Google Analytics. Some of you are using Google Tag Manager to drive that, and we'll talk about that specifically in a moment. But again, if you're using something different, please let me know so I can help to craft some specific advice for you as well. I don't want you to feel left out. And as I mentioned, GTM is being used by a decent percentage, just a little under a quarter of all of the sites that are participating in this session, in this course. And if you don't know about it, Google Tag Manager, or GTM, is a system for managing your Google Analytics and other tags. Sometimes you'll have a Facebook pixel, or a Pinterest pixel, or a way to track Twitter interaction. There are lots of different tags you may have on your site. It's just a much easier way to manage it, because once you have that GTM code on the site, you never have to go back to your developer again. And you can add tags, you can take them away, you can edit them. It's a really sweet way to go. And frankly, that's the way that Google Analytics is moving towards. Their most recent set of code base is using kind of a GTM light. And I can't imagine that eventually they won't be using that as their way of implementing Google Analytics. But again, together, vastly Google Analytics in one way or the other. So, real briefly before we get into the specifics, so why are we doing this? And it's for why would you want to measure your performance? Of course, for the basics business needs. Somebody's asked you how are we doing, but at the higher level, it's for the same reason that you have a dashboard and a GPS for your car. What's the current state? Where are you headed? Are you on course? What adjustments should you make? Are you being successful in driving your goals? So, and again, let me back up just a second. When you think about these, this is a plan. And way back in session 1, I think we talked about how many, do people have a digital strategy, or do you have a content strategy, or do you have a plan for what happens with your site over the course of the year? And a number of people said no, they haven't been able to get around to it. And number one is it's a good exercise. It helps you get a sense of where you're headed and why you're heading there, and how you're doing. But even if you don't, we're kind of backing into a plan through this, um, determining measuring how things are going, and deciding either beforehand and during the process how does that measure up against where you want to be. So think of this as a kind of a simple way to back into a plan, at least as far as it goes around measuring your performance. So current state, where are you right now? What happened last week? What happened last month? I'm going to break this into two pieces. Again, as explained at the top, we're going to look deeply at MailChimp and Google Analytics and how they work together. If you have MailChimp, you have access to everything we're talking about here. If you have Google Analytics running, you have access to everything we're talking about here. There are no special plugins. This is all basically the stock installation. And MailChimp is going to have data for you. And again, if you use it regularly, you know this. And I'm going to break this down because what I'm going to recommend at the end of all this is that you take this information from both of these sources and combine it to tell a better story and to make it easier for you to access that information whenever you need it. So, and in the PDF that you'll get after this session, you'll see that a lot of these data points are underlined, and they're just live links. And these will take you to pages that will explain not only what they are, but how to implement them, how to understand the information that you're getting. And I do know, again, that we have people along a wide spectrum of experience with all of these tools. And the deeper you dig, maybe fewer people have spent time with them. So we talked about some of the basics already. What's your open rate? What is your click-through rate? These are really basic information about judging the health of your campaigns. And we spent a lot of time on them, so I'm not going to spend a lot here. But if you follow these links, and if you've ever been in the MailChimp help area, it's very well organized. And also you can kind of follow links after link. So if you go to the open rate page, you'll see lots of information that you can click on to kind of dive deeper. So what's your conversion rate? And conversion rate is going to be different for every organization that's on this call. But it is a goal that you're setting, that you want to measure and you want to be measured against. I think a fair one might be how many people got to your support page, support us page. How many people actually made a donation? How many people got to your subscribe page, depending on how they got through. These are all goals that you can set up through Google Analytics and MailChimp working together. And this link goes to a page that talks about how to integrate your MailChimp and Google Analytics accounts. It's just a couple of clicks and giving permission. And then once you've set up goals in Google Analytics, and once you've tied those goals to campaigns in MailChimp, you'll be able to see how you're doing on those. So of all of the people who got newsletters, what percentage of them made it to the page about supporting the organization? Because especially in fundraising times, but not just in fundraising times, you're looking for people to come through and support the organization. Bounce rate, what those are. These are mails that don't go through. Different than the bounce rate that you'll see in Google Analytics. They have nothing to do with each other. Bounce rate on Google Analytics is just how many of the visitors to your site come to one page and then leave. So don't worry about, they have the same terminology here. We're just talking about mails that don't make it. Your unsubscription rate, what's that look like? Is it changing? Did it spike? What caused it to spike? What was the email newsletter that caused the spike? Kind of do some reverse engineering on that to try to figure out what the content was that may have caused the trouble. What's your list size and how fast is it growing? Again, we've talked about that at great length previously. This is the one of the three primary metrics that you absolutely have to track. If you don't, you just have no idea how your campaigns are doing. Are you getting spam complaints? Have they increased? Again, when and what was the mail around that time? You want to be sure that you're not getting more than a handful of those every time you send out mail. How many people are using the forwarding tool? Great metric based on some feedback in these sessions for people who've actually implemented that. You get a good sense of how well that's working. I talked to somebody, they're still dealing with very small numbers because they weren't promoting it before. But triple, quadruple in 1 month because people become aware of it. So you want to be sure that you're using that. And this could be one of the metrics you might want to report out from MailChimp. And then finally here, there's a lot around mobile stats. Again, thinking about your newsletter, thinking about how you word it, thinking about how you format it using the templates, and we'll get into templates in the next session. Mobile's really important to get a sense of that, because mobile users act differently, not just because they have a smaller screen than a desktop, but because they are in fact mobile. They're on the go. They probably have a shorter time on site, but their need state is higher, either around specifically looking for something on your site. That's not what we're here to talk about, but they've opened the newsletter. They are maybe filling some time. Maybe they're in a line in the supermarket and want to see what's available. So thinking about as that number continues to outnumber the desktop usage, it may help drive some of your strategy around the way you do your newsletter, making it mobile first. And then finally, does this track with your website audience? If you're seeing 60% mobile use on your newsletter and only 45% on the website, what does that tell you? And there's no easy answer there. You've got to dig in and try to figure out, is it just that people who are more likely to open the newsletter than people who are on the desktop when they're on their phone? But that doesn't necessarily translate across to people coming into your website, not from the newsletter. And those can be just different kinds of people, and something that's good to be aware of. I suspect you're going to see mobile continue to increase in percentages going forward. It's inevitable. Fewer and fewer people accessing news sites through their desktop, and that's good for you. Even though you do have a smaller palette to work with, but it's a different way of presenting it. Could be a lot of fun. So that's it for MailChimp, and I think that you can even go deeper, and there are other metrics that perhaps you might want to pull out of there into a dashboard or into a spreadsheet report. But these are some of the ones that I think are worth spending a little bit of time with and looking into. Any questions at this point around the MailChimp metrics? If not, we'll just keep moving.
No questions in the chat right now.
Okay. Remember, jump in anytime you would like. And I know this can get a little dense, and I'll give you, especially when we're dealing with it in aggregate as we are here. Another pitch, please sign up for a session next week. I see a number of people in today's session that haven't taken advantage of this yet. This week is again, we're going to do 30-minute sessions. That worked out really well last week. We were able to get into a lot more detail, and come to me with your issues, and we'll see if we can work it out together. But specifically here, Google Analytics. And how you can track mail campaigns and what they're doing for your site. So you're going to want to be, and this is just a generic Google Analytics dashboard to the right here, illustration not specific to our topic today. You want to know who's coming in from email. A lot of the email referrals, if you haven't set up specific link tracking, which you can do in in MailChimp, tied to your Google Analytics account, it'll just show up as direct traffic, and that's not helping you understand how much of the audience for your site is coming from your email newsletter, and how that's changing over time. So you'll be able, when you put these two together, you'll be able to track that in your Google Analytics. So here's again the link to how do you connect Google Analytics with MailChimp, and the mobile percentage of sessions and users. Again, this will help you get a sense of what does that breakdown look like. And the reason why that's important is they may have very different behaviors in how they sign up for a newsletter. If you don't make it super easy to somebody on mobile, they may be a whole lot less likely to actually sign up for your newsletter. So,
here.
Yes.
Meg asks, what version of MailChimp or MailChimp Analytics are you using? Ours doesn't look like this.
Okay, what that is on the right there is Google Analytics. That's just an old dashboard. Google Analytics has, so if that's what Meg's question is, this shouldn't look like MailChimp at all, because this is what MailChimp looks like. I may have grabbed an older screenshot, but this is just the audience report. Meg, does that help you?
No response yet, but
okay. Well, if she does, I'll pipe up when she does. New versus returning users. Okay, Meg, why don't we catch up afterwards, and maybe yeah, let's just set up a time. I'll send you an email and we can figure this out. Okay, so new versus returning users. This is always good to know. You're always going to, well, most sites are going to have many more new users than returning users, especially new sites. You're getting a lot of referral traffic from search, from other sites, from your newsletter. So you want to make sure you're picking up who new versus returning users are. And this link takes you to how Google Analytics determines the difference between them. And it certainly can't always. So if I come and I'm not logged in to Google, and I come to as a user to the site from my desktop, and then later come to the site from my phone, I'm two users there. So it's not a perfect science, and it never will be. I shouldn't say never. I don't suspect, given the current state of technology, it's ever going to be perfect, unless you have logged in users, which you're highly unlikely to. Just know that you're going to have a lot more new versus returning, and returning users are much more likely to sign up for a newsletter than new users, and it just makes sense. And new users can become returning users, of course, when they return. And the more they return, the more likely they are to be receptive to a message about a newsletter. So it goes back to an earlier session, give them as many entry points to signing up as you can. Excuse me. The goals. The thing about Google Analytics has a built-in goal function, and you can set up the goal to be triggered by a number of different items. Let me go ahead just a little bit. Actually, let me back up a little bit. Before we get to that, I'd forgotten I put this in. Your click-through rate is kind of goal-like in the sense that you know, the rate that you're tracking on your click-through rate is unlike a lot of, say, an e-commerce site. Their click-through rate is just to get somebody to a page that at that point they're trying to move them down the funnel to sign up for something, to buy something, whatever it is. In your case, you want them, your primary goal is you want them to read the story. Your secondary goal at that point in time is, whether on that click or in some future click, you want them to learn more about the organization and hopefully at some point sign up to support the organization. So, so you're already tracking goals if you're tracking click-through rate. But I'm talking also about higher level goals. When you're trying to get people to sign up for a subscriber page, I'm sorry, to visit a subscriber page and then sign up, to go to the page that talks about how they can support your website and operation, to get them to actually donate and fill out that form and complete that transaction. And then perhaps some tentpole content that you have, an investigative series that you have. You might want to set up a separate goal for those types of content, and you might want to group them because you don't have many. You are limited in the number of goals you can create in Google Analytics. So perhaps your tentpole content would be identified by a tag or a category in your in your web publishing system. Got a little confused there for a second. So for on WordPress, for instance, if you set it as the category of primary content or whatever you want to call it, then you don't have to worry about, oh, you made it just for the series about water quality, and that's burned forever because you can't delete it and you can edit it, but it's, then you lose the old data. But if you just create a goal for high quality content that you think is going to have some life to it, as shelf life to it, then you would set up a goal like that. Yes, go.
Julie asks, if someone reads your newsletter in their email, Outlook, or Gmail online without downloading images or clicking on any links or opening in their browser, are they counted as an open?
No, they can't. So what happens is systems like MailChimp and others, what they will, if you read carefully in the explanations for things, they will tell you that the open rate is a calculation in some ways. There will be people who haven't turned that off, and we will know exactly when they open it. There will be people who open it with the images off and click through, and at that point we know they had to open it to click through. So that click through also generates an open later than it would have if they had on the downloading images turned on. But it is, again, it's a fuzzy bit of science here because the data set is not complete. There will always be people who turn off images and open and scan and read and don't click through, and you will not count them. So that's why the click-through rate in many ways is the best one to be looking at, because not only is it accurate, but it also gets you to the end state that you're trying to reach, which is to get people to interact with your newsletter and move to the site to read the full details. So so then a good click-through rate, the click-through rates, I don't have it in front of me again, but they're in the single digits for average for media and news sites. A good click-through rate is as high as you can get it. There is, when you think about averages, you're averaging the worst and the best. Some of our sites in this session, in this group, have very high click-through rates, and they're enviable. And some of them are, as pushing 50%, and you can get to those kinds of numbers when you have a low subscription rate and a high engagement rate. The more newsletters you're sending out, the likelihood of getting someone to click through is just because of the sheer numbers will start to drift downward. But anything that gets in above 10% is just outstanding from a industry standard. I think there's no end goal. You always just want to be improving that. So wherever you are, by the end of the year, you want to grow up by 15%, 20%, whatever you set as your goal. And until you get to 100%, you're never satisfied.
One more question, quick.
Retargeting. Yes. I have this window open from David Fritz, or Fritzy. Sorry if I got it wrong. I got it right one of those 2 times. Yes, I would do that. And we talked about this in a previous session, that you keep a rolling audience that are people who have not opened the most recent newsletter. And then, and again, you're going to catch some people who have opened it because the open rate is not perfect. You could do it with a click rate, people who haven't clicked, and but then you're going to catch people on the other side of it who have opened, and your messages you haven't clicked through, and it's a little more. I think you're better off with the open. So maybe 3 days later, after you sent the first wave, send only to the second wave of people who haven't opened this current newsletter, and just as a reminder that they haven't opened it, and that maybe you missed it. Maybe you meant to open it and it just scrolled down. There are ways also to put in there options for people to tell you, please don't remind me again, and then you just you'll want to edit your rules for that audience so that you're not the 2 factors you're capturing are that they haven't opened and they haven't opted out of the reminder emails. So yes, I would do that. I think that's going to really help you get more people engaging with the newsletter. And then you can track that. If I know of a lot of people who've gotten pretty good lift out of that. But if you do it and give it a month, if you're doing weekly newsletters and you don't see a lift out of it, if you don't see more than a handful of people clicking through on the second send, then maybe it's not for the people that you're sending to. But I would definitely try it, David. One last thing about Google Analytics. When you set up a goal in Google Analytics, it is not retroactive, which means if you would like to know how many people who came in from the newsletter made it to the donation form, the day you set up the goal is the earliest you will ever have that information. Even if you've got 2 years of Google Analytics data, you could probably go in and manually try to figure this out. But for the goal reporting, it starts today when you create the goal. So keep that in mind. So if you're thinking about, it'd be really cool to be tracking goals, maybe spend a little time thinking about what might those goals be in the future. Not just create the first one that you think of, and maybe there's some other things that are related to that you might want to make on that day as well. And then, a year from now, you won't care because you'll have it. But for right now, you're going to have a very limited data set until you start gathering data. Also, you are limited in the number of goals you can set. I meant to look at that before I started the session, but if anybody knows, give a shout. but there are a limited number of goals that you can set in, at least in the free edition of Google Analytics, which I assume we're all using. And I don't even know if that changes in the paid edition, but I also don't have $100,000 to find out. So there's, you can really, Google Analytics, the price is either free or more money than you probably have. So I stick with free. So the first part there was about what's your current state. And just briefly, I'll stop here if there are any other questions around these two sets of analytics. And I'll keep moving. If you have any, I'll be happy to go back. We talked about where are you now, where are you headed, are you on course? That's goals and key performance indicators, metrics, whatever you want to call them. So what are your growth goals? At the beginning, I mentioned we're kind of building a content or digital strategy upside down. We're starting at the endpoint and backing into it. What are your current growth trends on your site? How many newsletter how many page views from newsletters did you have a year ago? How many did you have a month ago? What's that trend look like? This is going to help you determine what's a realistic goal that you can set, and then you set those SMART goals that we talked about earlier. And you definitely want to make sure that these are measurable and they're attainable. Don't commit to goals that you know are way more than you can do. And on the other side, don't sandbag it too much. If you think you can maybe make 15, try 17. It's always good to try to stretch and get more subscribers, get a better click rate, get a better integration of the people who come in through newsletters, make it all the way to donate money. And then you want to set those goals in your measurement tools. It's not set. You just want to make sure that you're tracking these goals and then pulling them out into the tools that you're going to be using to measure. And then you want to measure regularly. Manual is what a lot of us do. I've had to do for years, and I use Excel. You can use Google Sheets, but basically it's setting up your metrics over a timeline and putting them into the spreadsheet and updating it monthly, weekly, whatever your frequency is you can bear for the manual effort that's going to go into it. It's not perfect, but it's free. There's a much more expensive layer called business intelligence software, which can be very highly priced, can set you back a lot, and can be a very steep learning curve. Microsoft has one called I'm blanking on it. It's a Power BI, I think. Just search for Microsoft Business Intelligence. I've used it a little bit, not intensively, but the price is right. It is free. At least there's a free version that you can use. There's a tool called Domo that, frankly, isn't as good as some of the much cheaper dashboard tools that I've used. As an example, I'm showing you a dashboard here of how you can display a lot of information on one screen from a product called Clipfolio. It is a paid product. Their starting price is $29 a month, so it's not cheap. But it's not ridiculous. It's not $5,000 a month like some of these products. They do offer discounts, but for nonprofits of 25% off, but only on their higher level products. So basically, it takes a $100 a month tool down to $75 a month. But thinking about how frequently you want to update this information, or if in your organization you get asked for this kind of information frequently, you might find these kinds of products are worth your time, or worth your money to save you time. Clipfolio integrates a whole lot of sources, certainly in the case of what we're talking about today. Drop dead easy to put both Google Analytics and MailChimp data into the same dashboard. Also in Google Analytics, by the way, they have a tool called Google Data Studio, which is free. And you can bring in information from your Google Analytics or from also Google Sheets as well. So you might be able to export, and in fact, I know you can export your data from MailChimp, and this is really getting geeky, and I'm trying to keep this top level to not overwhelm you with detail, but this is the kind of thing we could go into in a one-on-one session. You could export information out of MailChimp into Google Sheets, and then from Google Sheets into Google Data Studio. So you can actually, for free, with a little bit of work and a little bit of learning, if you haven't used Data Studio, which is part of the analytics suite that's free, you can pull these all together on your own as well. So there's a lot of ways to do this. Some of them take a little more work up front. Some of them take some money. Some of them are manual, and take your time to update the information to get it into spreadsheets. And again, if you've got people on your team who are really adept at Google Sheets, there are ways that they might be help you figure out how to automate even what I'm calling a manual process here. So lots of ways to do it. I think we could do a whole session on this stuff, but we don't have time for it today, that's for sure. But the point here is you need, if you're going to gather metrics, you have to pull them together somewhere so you can easily report them, whether that's to your team, your manager, just to yourself, to get a sense of how you're doing. You shouldn't have to go digging when you wonder how the click rate is doing. You shouldn't have to dive in to MailChimp to figure that out. You should have something that's already telling you that information. And the reason why you have it is to try to figure out where you're going and to make adjustments. So if something's, if you've seen that your click rate is still sub 10% and isn't moving upwards, something needs adjustment. And that's so, metrics will never tell you the answer, other than, they will give you the facts. They won't tell you what to do with the facts. It's up to you to take those facts and figure out how to make changes to your product. So that's what they're doing for you. Another pause here. I figured we'd get this far without questions, and you've already had a whole bunch. So again, a reminder, I'm not going to sit on this slide, but pop into the chat, which I can see, or raise your hand, and Mara can help you out there. And here's the thing I want to spend just a little bit of time with. We got about 15 minutes left in this session. And I think there's just a bunch of traffic sitting out there for you that you're not using. And yes, this isn't about your newsletter directly. This is about your website. But more visitors to your website equals more opportunities to get them to subscribe to your newsletter. And then all the metrics we've been talking about today and all the reasons why you would be doing that. And that's Google News. And news sitemaps. And some of our the people in this program, in the sessions that we're doing over 8 weeks, are in Google News, and some have created news sitemaps. And I'll explain in a moment what a news sitemap is. But think of it as it's just like it's just something that gets auto-published to your site so that search engines that are looking for news, not just content, but news specifically, can find it easier. most of the people, most of the sites that are managed by the people who are taking this class do not have a news sitemap. Some of you do, and you know who you are, probably. Maybe you don't. But so what is a news? What is a news sitemap? What does it do? It's a bunch of machine readable code that again, let's say Google. It tells Google that there have been 5 stories, for instance, published this morning, and this afternoon there's another 2, and then tomorrow you publish 3 more. They are looking at this to give them a clue that there is news, and they look at that sitemap most frequently when a site has been approved as a source of original content that is news. And really briefly, again, this could be a session all in its own. But I wanted to make you aware of this because this came up in a couple of one-on-one sessions, and realized that not everybody was using this. And it's a gift from Google because they're lazy, number one, and number two, they want to make sure they're presenting as much legitimate news as possible. So they've given us the tools to be able to help them in that goal. So your site traffic goes up, so does your opportunity to grow your newsletter subscriptions. I'll just blank this out. But this is one of you on the call right now. This is a search for just the site, and whatever that site is. There are 4,460 search results for elements on that site. So it's a young site. It's a smaller site. It's growing, but then site search. You click over from all to the news, and you see there are about 1,500. There are 1,570 results on that site, and that's happened because there is a Google News sitemap on that site. I don't know whether they're registered. I didn't ask them about this. But if you don't take advantage of that, here's what happens. Here's another young site, 809 results. But if you look at the second image down below, there are no news sites, no news results. And this is a news site. And you be thinking, well, who's searching? Nobody on Google bothers to search for something and then click on news. And that may be true or not, but you're right. In general, most people just do a search. But what happens is when there are news results, Google will surface those for at the top of the page. So even if the Maryland General Assembly, and this is another one I pulled out, the Maryland General Assembly is we have a question about there's a special session coming, and you search for that, you get news results at the top because that's the most relevant answer for that particular search query. I see the person with the long name asking, where do you register as a Google News site? And that's coming up right now. So if you go, number one, it's easier to do this if you have Google Analytics account. Most of us do. If you don't, it's not a deal breaker. But it used to be you could verify your site through Google Analytics. They're using a different site verification right now as the primary, but it's always good to have a GA account if you don't anyway. But let's say you do, or you don't, it doesn't matter. What you do need to have is Search Console, which access. And for that, you will need a Google email address. It doesn't have to be at gmail.com. It can be a G Suite address as well. But you want to create a Search Console account, or your Google account, sorry, and add a site to that account through the Search Console. So if you just follow this link that is set up here, or go to just Google for Search Console. You'll see that. And what it's asking me here, this is a screen or two in, but it's asking me what is the site that I want to register. And it's telling me, I've already given it a name, I'm sorry, and it's telling me how to verify it. And it's saying, go to your domain registrar and put this bit of copy in there. And there are other things that you can do. If you have a tech resource on staff or a tech resource that you work with regularly, they will know exactly how to deal with this. If you don't, and you have access to your registrar, GoDaddy or whatever, I could walk you through this on our one-on-one session, and it's a 5-minute job. It takes longer to describe it than to actually do it. So you verify with Google that you own this site, and that's important because you could do a lot of things with that. But for now, just know that you've confirmed with them that you own that site, because who else could take these steps but then somebody who's authorized to do something with that site. Is there a way to tell, and I'm sorry I skipped over Julie because it's a long question, I'll get back to it. Venice just asked, is there a way to tell whether you've already done this? Yeah, you just go to Search Console. I forget what the actual URL is. It's not search.google.com, but just Google for Search Console, and you'll get, that'll be your entry page. And once you're logged in, you will see the sites that you have verified. And if you don't see your site in there, then you just take the step to verify another site. And then what you do with this information, then to get to the question at hand, and there are a lot of steps to get here, but again, this is 15 minutes total at the beginning. So you go to the Publisher Center for Google News, which, by the way, has lots of information for news sites about how to interact with Google and making sure that your site gets the steps you can take to make sure that you are within their criteria for what a news site is, and you all are. Everybody I've talked to, every site I've seen, absolutely should be in the Google News Index. And just some tips and tricks, both for the publisher and the producer level. And the producer, they're considering somebody who has their hands in the site on a daily basis, and the publisher is the owner. At there, you submit a request for inclusion. The first part of it is 1,000 characters about your site. Just boil it down. What is it that you have that is news? Some of your site may not be news, but you may have some opinion on there. But for the most part, you want to stress that you are creating original content. They will ask you to review their content policies. Again, I think you're all going to be good. And then this is why you needed that Search Console. There will be a way you will need to verify your site ownership through Search Console. And there's just a click through that in which you can do this. So that's why you got to get these steps in order. And then you submit the form, and within 1 to 3 weeks, they claim and promise, they will give you an answer. And this will not be automated. There will actually be somebody who takes a look at your site to make sure that you're not lying. And in the current environment, it probably gets a lot more scrutiny than it did in the past. But let's say you get approved. In the meantime, while you're waiting, you want to make sure that your site is meets all their technical needs as well. And again, I don't see any reason why any of your sites wouldn't, but it has to be crawlable. You can't have in your robots.txt file, which if you don't know that you have one, I think everybody on this site, on this group has one. And that is your site name / lowercase, not uppercase as I have it here, robots.txt. And you'll see these are the instructions that a search engine crawler looks for when they come to your site. And these instructions say, here are the pages you can look at, here are the pages you can't. The basic level says all search engines can look at my site. But if you set it the other way and say you can't crawl my site, you will not be become a Google News site. Nobody has done that. I've looked at them all. They're all configured properly. You need to have a unique URLs that are active. Of course you do, because you're using CMSs. They will crawl only HTML pages. So if you have PDF content that is standalone, it won't crawl it. But if you have PDF that's on an HTML page, it will. And you don't have to have a news sitemap, but it is highly recommended. And how do you make a news sitemap? Well, if you're using Yoast for your SEO plugin for Google Analytics, you're already on your way. It is a paid upgrade to get the news sitemap in Yoast. I think it's $69 a year. There are also free plugins. I don't have the names with me on this call, but I will send that out to the group again. Make sure, or actually I'll edit this document to get some more of them in there, because there are other plugins for the news sitemap, and I think some of them there are a couple of good ones that are free. And all that does is it waits to see you publish something through in this case through WordPress. And once you publish a story, it will add that story to the news sitemap. And if Google has determined that you are a news site in good standing and have a daily frequency or a more than daily frequency, they will ping your site with that frequency eventually. Maybe not at the very beginning. Once they determine that you really are publishing as frequently as you say you are. And they prioritize news sites for crawling, because they know that people are coming to them when a news event is happening. So this is just a fast track to get to the top of a Google search results page that no other sites have. News sites are a special breed. They've always been treated differently. They now are treated even better by Google because of the problems with fake sites, which none of you are. And this is a tool that you can use to really get yourself going. And I think, in some cases you might see, a massive spike in traffic. Now, just to recap, because there's a lot that we just went through. First, you go to Search Console and verify the ownership of your site. And there are ways that are in Search Console that will tell you how to do that. Then you go to the publisher site and submit your site for approval. This is optional, but I wouldn't recommend it, not doing it. You want to make sure that you have a news sitemap. There are people on this call who are regularly in Google News who do not have a news sitemap. And the reason for that is because you're a massive site that Google has found on its own and has recognized on its own that you are a news site. So you're getting the benefit without doing the work. I think you probably even do better if you had a news sitemap. The smaller sites here, the growing sites, Google hasn't probably discovered you yet as a news site. And even though you're in their search index, as I showed you earlier, one of the sites is in the search index, but Google has no sense that it is a news site. So give them the clue. Make a news sitemap. And by the way, I probably didn't say this earlier, but this is not for your readers. This is not in a format that this is not a sitemap that they would look at. This just sits in the background on your site, and Google will know where to look for it. And I got to watch my time. We got 2 minutes, and they will know where to look for it, and they will crawl it. Submit your news site through your news sitemap through the Google Search Console, and you're good to go. So it's a couple weeks process of waiting, but it will be well worth it. I'd love it if people would just do this now if you haven't. And if you need some help, please sign up for the sessions. I got a half hour for you. If we get stuck in the middle of something, unless I got somebody waiting, I don't shut them down. We go as long as we need to get this, to get you set up. And this is just something you should be using. Go to, what happened to it? There it is. Go generally the same URL. This time the end of it is INN6. Let me close this out so I can copy that, and I will put it in the chat as well. Mara, since we are at our end here, I didn't get to read some of the longer questions. Could you, anybody wants to stick around for a little bit? I'll run through these. If not, I'll try to answer them offline.
Yeah, sure. So there's that longer one from Julie. Sorry if you've covered this in a previous workshop. Is there data about the best marketing strategy for newsletter sign-up conversion, social media ads, modals, fixed ads, which modals pop-ups work best? Is there data on the best placement for a fixed ad on a page? So it kind of gets into the weeds about.
Sure. So session 3, we went into this a lot. So you should have this in your email. If you don't, I'll send it out to you, Julie. Anyway, I'll just send you session 3 again. And we went into that quite a bit. And watch the replay too, because if you can, there's always more detail than can be crammed into a PowerPoint slide. So Venice, we answered.
And then she asked can you use Google News if you have a paywall?
I believe so. Yeah, because everybody, there are, Google News is putting Wall Street Journal in there, and it's putting daily newspapers that have a metered paywall. I don't know what their current policy is on that. Let me see. I didn't realize we had some paywalls here. I will have to get back to you on that for the final answer. But I believe no, I'll just get you the answer. I don't want to go down the wrong path here. Ken, you're asking about publishing infrequently. I can tell you do not have a sitemap, Ken, and you don't have a sitemap at all. And you don't have a new sitemap either. If you're using Google, I'm sorry, if you're using WordPress, the free version of Yoast will get you a regular sitemap for the site. But you will need, if you want to stay free, you're going to have another plugin, and that's something I wanted to follow up with as well on this PowerPoint, and get that to people. Well, Angie's gone because she had to jump on another call. But yes, we do. You do send out the recording. You did say that. No index error. You know what? I have to look into that, John.
It says 24 pages are affected.
Oh, okay. So that means that you have pages on your site that have that are passing an attribute for in the metadata that says no index. So that is, what's the site, Ken? I'm sorry, John.
It's Montana Free Press.
Okay, I'll take a look, John, and send you a note. But I'm pretty sure that's what that's going to be. And Ken, you have Yoast Premium. Sadly, this is not the news XML is not included in the premium. It's another buy up, $69 a month. It almost gets to the point where it's worth buying their bundle, but I don't think there's anything else in that bundle that would be worth paying for our sites. So it'll take you up to, what is it, $80 a month, $80 a year for the premium, plus another $70 for this. So, $150, $160 per year. Yoast does amazing things. And the greatest thing it ever does, if you ever delete pages a lot, while you're redoing your site or whatever, it will automatically create a redirect for you, so that you don't have to worry about having dead links out there in search engines. That alone for me was worth the price of entry, but it may not be for you. And John, I will get back to you on those other pages. And if anybody's left on this call, hey, we still have 13 people here. That's it for this week. And next week, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into templates and such. And we're coming up on the end here, but I think there's a lot here that you can apply. And please let me know if you run into any kind of bumps around signing up for Google News. And if you don't want to sign up, I don't know why, but let me know, and maybe we could talk it through.
All right.
And that, I think we'll say goodbye until 2 weeks from today.
Yep. Sounds good. Thanks, Tim. See you all.
Thank you.